what it takes to build your own startup, right? This is the list. This PowerPoint will be available to you, and it will be on our YouTube channel also. So to me, it's about 14 points. If you want to build up a successful startup, you have to get all these 14 points right. Okay. Uh, so if you look at 14 points, each and every one of these is a lecture, right? You can take time, hours and hours going into details. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you the numbers, right? The content briefly, so that you know the big picture. But you may not know, or you may not learn everything today, but at least you know the landscape, the manifold. Okay. Then whenever you see, okay, I'm not really good in number 6, number 10, number 8, or number 2, right? You can always study in detail. So that is the approach, my approach today. So let me take one by one. Number one. So if you are a startup, you need to look at what is your invention, what is your intellectual property, and IP status, and the FTO, freedom to operate. This is upfront. This is very, very important. Sometimes you don't have your own IP, right? But you want to build something which is out there, right? But you need to check whether you are free to do that, or if it is someone else's IP, so that you cannot just duplicate it, right? So that is what is called freedom to operate. Number two, TRL, technology readiness level. What is the readiness level of your technology? Is it in the early stage, or is it closer to an actual product, or any step, any state in between? Number three, team building. So who are the others in your team? Have you got the right people in right place? Because one bad apple can spoil your startup, right? Number four, customer discovery. Who is your customer? Sometimes you sell directly to the people, retail. Sometimes you sell to other startups. Sometimes you have services, products, so many different customers, right? And also, if you sell something to a university, university is not actually the customer is probably staff and the students who are using that service, right? So like that. Then how to incorporate your company in that territory, let's say in Sri Lanka. How do you incorporate your company? You need to know. You don't have to do that yourself, but you need to know what it takes. Number six, competitiveness. How competitive you are against your competitors, other competitors, right? Then number seven, pest analysis. I'll tell you what it is when it comes to that slide number 7. Your business model, number 8. You need to figure that out, right? What is your business model? Number 9, networking. You are not alone in your business. You are working with your partners. So you need to identify who are your partners, and more than that, what service they deliver to you, at what cost, and at what time. Okay. So when it comes to the nitty-gritty details, every item here on the list becomes very, very important. Number 10, investors and equity sharing. At some point of time, you need investment. You need funds, right, and other resources from outside. So it doesn't come for free. You have to share something. You have to give it something back. And that is, most cases, the ownership of your company, equity. You have to share. How do you do that? If you do not like to share anything, you don't get investors also, right? Then finance handling. It's very important to have financial hygiene right from the day one. Number 12, human resource management. How do you manage your subordinates, your employees, right? You need to pay attention to that also. Number 13, legal framework. What is the applicable law? You can't say, I didn't know the law, right? You need to have somebody to tell you this is the legal framework and you have to work accordingly. Then number 14, continuous product development. That is to say that even though you start your startup with a particular invention, product, you cannot live on that product or invention forever. There is a particular life cycle, and after that, there's no profit out of that product, and you need to look the other ways, right? So continuous product development. If you get all these things right, you are a successful businessman, entrepreneur. So let me take into little details, right, of each and every one. You can ask questions anytime, right? By the way, do not have to hold everything at the end. So just interrupt me and ask if you have any questions. Number one, invention and intellectual property status and freedom to operate. So inventions are like patents, designs, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. Okay, all of these things are intellectual property. You have to protect your IP. Not only that, you have to manage your IP, right? Manage. You have to exploit. You have to convert your IP into revenue. Okay, so through licensing probably. You can produce yourself a product out of your own invention, or you can license it out to someone else to produce or manufacture and sell, and you get the revenue, royalty out of that. More than that, freedom to operate. There are a lot of entrepreneurs, businesses out there who just copy designs on the internet or copy designs from the research papers. In that case, usually they do not do the FTO analysis, but the proper way is that you cases and figure out whether this particular invention, even though it is out there, has been patented by someone, right? And if the patent is enforced in your territory, let's say Sri Lanka, then you are not allowed to use it commercially. You can use it for your knowledge, education, for teaching, for research. You can use that invention for anything but commercialization. You can't use it as a product and sell it and make money out of that, right? If it is patented by someone else and the patent is enforced in Sri Lanka, you can run into problems if you do. Number two, technology readiness level. So it is a 10-point scale. This one is from NASA, special for space systems. Sometimes might not exactly work for any and all inventions, but this is the most comprehensive TRL scheme. That's why I put it over here. If you look at number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 up to this point, right? You can read this leisurely later. This is basic stage for any intellectual property, any invention. So usually you accomplish these things in the IP process. We call it IP process, right? Before you actually build something out of it, right? These are the different stages in the very early stage. So you come a bit serious when it comes to TRL 6 and above, right? So 6 is basically lab prototype, like what students do for their undergrad projects, right? Lab prototypes. Then you change the components into the proper industrial grade components and make it to an industrial prototype, rugged and sometimes looks better. And then you test it. You make maybe 30, 40, 50 of these units and give it to the prospective customers and ask them to use it. And that is a beta tested product. So when it comes to that level, we call it TRL 10. So you need to figure out where you are against this TRL, right? Where your product or invention is against this scale. So sometimes if you do not do that, you probably think this is ready to commercialize, but in actual situation, right, it's not ready. Maybe TRL 7, maybe 8, 9, like that. So it's very important to compare or get someone else to judge on the TRL of your invention. It's extremely important. Team building. You need to have passionate people and committed people, people who do not have other interests, who do not have other problems, or who, even though they have other problems, other commitments, actually deliver to your startup. Okay, so you need to figure out who is your CEO. You don't have to be the CEO, right? You find out the best person to be the CEO who can actually speak, communicate, right? Do marketing, who can build connections, who can bring contracts to your company. That is the CEO. Okay, doesn't have to be you. You have to figure out who that person is. Then the CTO, Chief Technical Officer, who is really good in tech. Maybe he doesn't communicate so much, but he knows a lot how to put things together and build it. Then the marketing officer, right? Somebody has to market this. There's no point of building maybe the best invention in the world if you cannot market it, right? So marketing doesn't mean that you cheat people, right? You don't cheat people, but you communicate properly and convince people to buy, right? To subscribe to your product. And the chief accounting officer to make sure that financial hygiene is maintained at all times. Okay. So if you run into financial problems, you run into major problems in your startup. So you need to avoid that one, right? And also the director board. You need to have good people or reputed individuals, right? Even though they are not the part of the initial core, you can request people. Would you mind sitting in our board, right? So a reputed person, experienced person, probably they would volunteer to be in your board. So get those people, and they will bring their reputation into your startup company. So when you have a lot of people delivering various services to your startup, you need to give something back, salary or shares. If you have initial capital, you can actually pay some money, right? And ownership is with you or the core team. Okay, or else you can bring people in and you don't have money to pay, but you give some shares. Let's say if they deliver the service for first 2 years, you give 5% of your equity, something like that, right? So you get people to stay with you because their ownership depends on, uh, as long as they stay with you, right? The moment they leave, they lose their shares, right? 100% or 50%, whatever. So you need to have that kind of agreement when you bring people in to your startup. So that is why these contractual agreements are extremely important. Every person who comes as a key player in your company, right? You need to have a contractual agreement, and there you need to have what is called exit clauses. If you run into problems, how do you get out of the problem? Do not assume that there won't be any problems, right? Always assume there can be problems. People will leave your company, right? So you need to have these doors open, right? People can leave at any time. That's okay, but it doesn't have to. You should not let that for the company to collapse, right? So company has to have the robustness even if some people just leave the company. So that is why the exit clauses are very important. And also you have to make sure exiting a company, you have to make it a hard decision for everybody, all these people, right? You should not make it as an easy decision for these people. So then you run into problems, right? Customer discovery is extremely important. Sometimes you deliver your products to other businesses or directly to the customers, or it can be social enterprise. The different modalities, right? When you run businesses, like for example, we have here Ushani. Ushani's one is mostly social enterprise. He's sometimes she's selling directly to the customers, right? But maybe she has all kinds of modalities in her business. Then the company incorporation. I think most of you guys know this because you have gone through it. Maybe you learn by the hard way, right? You have to register your company at ROC, register of companies, you have to work with the audit firms and the law firms, right? Because if you are not really good in law, the jargon they use, the documents, and when it comes to annual returns, you need to come work with a company secretarial service or the audit firm, because they have the specific software to create your balance sheets, annual returns, etc. If you want to do that, I have seen some of our startups, they do it themselves because they didn't have money to pay for these services. Initially, maybe you can do that, but I suggest that you get professional service at some cost, right? Uh, then you need to describe your company at the ROC in the forms that you fill during the company incorporation, your address, who you are, who are the people involved, who are the shareholders, and what you are and what you do, how you do, etc. Whether you export items or whether sell locally. Brief description about your company. And when you write that, you have to make it a bit more generic, right? Because you have to operate within your description. So you should not make it very wide open because ROC will not allow you to do that. And you should not either make it very tuned or focused, because then you lose the flexibility. If you want to change your product lineup or how you operate, etc., you need to maintain that flexibility. Then the director board meetings, AGMs, you need to maintain all these things. Never miss board meetings, right? You need to maintain annual board meetings and keep the records and sign and keep it in the file, because these are very important. At some point of time, you have to produce these minutes, right, to banks, other investors, when you apply for grants, etc. Right? Sometimes they check your history. Then and board meetings are extremely important because you have to take very important decisions in the company initial stage, right? When there's an investor, all of a sudden you are in a firefight, what to do, how to do. But if you maintain regular board meetings, right, all these daily basis things are properly taken care of. So therefore you don't have big problems, right, at any time. So it's extremely important. Even though you have a small board, maybe 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, right? You still want to maintain the board meetings regularly. And the bank account, you just can't open a bank account. You need to have a board resolution. There also you need to have a board meeting, right? And on the board meeting, the agenda is about that bank account, which bank, which branch, etc. Right? Then the remuneration and reward schemes and promotion schemes for your employees. You need to, at some point of time, come up with this scheme, because you want to attract your best skills to your company and maintain them, right, in the company. And you need to worry about your company policies, right? Company culture. Every company has a certain culture, right? So if you can come up with some unique culture, unique policies to your company that is attractive to employees, so then you are a good business, right? And also company assets, company value. So what is the value of your company? So if you know physical commodities, you can value, right? Vehicles, buildings, etc. But that's not all about company value, right? Company value can sometimes be your intellectual property, but how to value it is a big question mark, right? So always judgment, estimate, and future market potential, etc., also come into the picture when you value your company. Then comes into the textbook theory, actually, this one, the environment. Now, if you look at the diagram uh, on the right-hand side here, right, you can see 3 circles, the middle one, then the next layer, and the outer layer. The middle one here is the internal environment. We call it internal environment, right? So there, what you have is board of directors, shareholders, employees, pretty much the family of the startup, right? the owners, board of directors, employees, and your company culture. You have to manage, right? The board members take decisions, employees implement their work, and there's certain culture in the company. So immediately out of that is what's called the task environment, right? So, or external environment. So who are there? You have your competitors there, right? Other companies operating in the same domain, same technologies, they are there. Regulators, partners, suppliers, and customers. You work with customers, you get your supplies from the suppliers, and you have other partners to deliver various resources, services. So you deal with all these people, right, around you. And there, how to judge whether your external environment is favorable to you or challenging to you, I recommend you read about Porter's five forces. So there, Porter's is very generic framework to quantify, judge whether your task environment is favorable to your business. Right? So this is the immediate external environment. Then if you go beyond that, it becomes the territorial landscape, general environment, right? Where you have the international dimension, right? Political stability or political situation of the country, then culture of the people, economic dimension, whether it's a developing economy or dying economy, and also technological dimensions, whether the country has the technology to support your business. So, for example, if you are in a growing economy, which means your customers are having increasing buying power, so it's good for your company, right? So you can expect more people to buy from you. On the other hand, if it is a dying economy, you can expect people not to buy your product, or if they buy, it should be a very low price. Okay. And also political stability can be a big issue for so some of the companies to sustain their operations in those areas, right? And if you look at the technology, let's say, for example, if your company has some online service, so for you to flourish, you need to have a good internet infrastructure in that country. So if the country doesn't have that kind of infrastructure, you're not going to be successful. So likewise, right? So you need to look at the external environment, whether the country, the region, the territory favors business, right? Or favor your business particularly. So to analyze that, I recommend you study PEST or PESTEL analysis. So you need to do the Porter's five forces to assess whether you are in the favorable external environment, and then PEST or PESTEL analysis to figure out whether the territory, the country favors your business. So these analysis helps the boards, the entrepreneurs, right, to figure out whether you want to do business or not in a particular country, or if you want to locate your factory, right, in a different part of the world, strategically, right? It's basically based on the Porter's five forces and PESTEL analysis. You have seen some companies moving from US to China, or maybe Sri Lanka to Vietnam, Cambodia, because of these external factors or general environment uh, being favorable to business. So this is a brief about Porter's five forces. So it's about competitiveness analysis, right? So you have the competitive rivalry, threat from the new entries, right? So there are new entrants always into the market who are manufacturing and selling pretty much the same product that you are selling, right? And you have substitute products also. And you have supplier power, buyer power. Supplier power means when for you to manufacture whatever product, you need to have supplies. raw material from suppliers. So at what cost you're going to buy these supplies? Can you bargain it, right? Or what is the strength of the suppliers to set the price for you, right? So if it is a very strong supplier power, you have absolutely no bargaining power, but just to purchase from those suppliers. Again, on the other side, if you look at the buyers, the customers, right? So if they have very strong buying power, which means they set the price for you. You can't set the price and expect them to purchase, right? So, so there are 5 points here. Existing companies. If there are so many existing companies, you have a lot of competition with them. So the competition is high there. So what you do is you get it into a chart and say existing companies, high or low or medium. You just give it a grading, and then go to the new entrants. What is the likelihood of having new entrants into the market? More competition, high or low or medium. Substitute products. Are there any substitute products, right? So if there are, then again it's high. If there are no substitute products, then it is low, right? You don't have much of a competition there. Bargaining power suppliers, high or low. Bargaining power buyers, high or low. So once you grade it, high, medium, low, all 5 of these things, you get the cumulative value, right? Whether it is high or low or medium. So if it is a high competitiveness, right? After all, these 5 assessments, if it is high, if it ends up being high, which means your profit prospectus is low, right? You don't get enough revenue and profit. And also it tells you what is called entry and exit barrier, because if you have very high competitiveness, your entry barrier is high because you are also going to enter into a market. So if there is a high competition there, right, entry barrier is very high. So even for you to start your first business, even if for you to sell to your first customer, you need to elevate yourself to a very high level. You need to have a lot of funding, infrastructure, other resources, even to start, even to see your day one in business. High entry barrier. So when you enter to a market with high entry barrier, like for example, airline industry, there are a lot of airlines, right? It's not easy for you to have another airline, right? Because there are a lot of regulations, a lot of resources, land. It's not easy. It's very, 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 very difficult because entry barrier is very high. Now, if you somehow enter to a market where entry barrier is very high, it's also very, very difficult for you to get out of that. That is the exit barrier. Exit barrier is also very high because after spending so much money and other resources, you just don't want to exit easily, right? You want to get going, hoping something will happen and you will be in business, right? Maybe next year, 2 years later, and so on. So you want to stay there as long as it's possible and with a prospective mind, right? Because exiting is basically losing a lot of resources. So Porter's 5 forces will let you analyze where you are, right, in terms of the competitive landscape. Then if you want to analyze your general environment, right, it is the pest analysis or pestal analysis. There you look at the political environment of the country, how favorable is the country or region for business, right? Again, you can say low, medium, high kind of grading, right? Just put it numbers, don't have to be very precise because none of these things is actually precise. This is very vague in a way. So if you have some gut feeling about how the political landscape is, that's good enough, right? Just give it a grading. Then economic landscape, right? Whether the economy is developing or is dying economy, right? And fiscal policies, interest rates of the banks, etc. Get some idea, and they put red, amber, green, or whatever, right? Or high, medium, low. Then the social aspect. So this is also important because you're going to hire people, recruit people from that society. So you need to know whether the people are punctual, whether they work hard, or whether they are easygoing people, right? Because that will affect your company, whether they are educated people or skillful people, their culture, attitudes is very, very important, right? And in some countries like France, for example, they have 2 hour lunch break, 2 hour. So sometimes this is not acceptable to you, right? To your company. Maybe you need to have 1 hour lunch, not more than that, maybe 45 minutes, because your business need that kind of work ethics, right? Working practice rather. So therefore, you shouldn't go to that kind of country if your business require that kind of social requirement, right, or behavior. And the technology, as I said to you, some businesses need mobile infrastructure, communication infrastructure, electricity or machinery or maybe internet, that kind of thing, right? If you don't have that technology, it's difficult for you to do your business in that country. So take this political, economic, social, technology, and then this EL is actually environmental and law. So you can take that also. Whether there are environmental regulations that restrict you from performing, right, or practicing your business. You need to look at that. If it is the case, it is a high thing, right? Environmental aspect is high. You want to have them maybe low, whatever way, right? As you define. Maybe high means better or low means not better, right? Bad. So, or the other way around, whatever way you want to interpret it. And then law. What is the applicable law of the country? Sometimes some countries, the law actually restrict your operations. You need to look at that. You don't need to be a lawyer to understand some of these basic things. This is basic law that is applicable to you, right? But this analysis is extremely important for you to understand whether you are in the right place, right, to do your business. Then comes to the business canvas. They call it business model canvas. This is basically business model, and you can read books about business canvas, business model. Business canvas is putting all these things into one um, easily accessible canvas. Okay, canvas is just one page like that. This is the entire business model in a canvas. So it has how many blocks? 9 blocks. So most of the things I discussed up to now are here. Right? This is just assembly of all these pieces together. You have number 1, value proposition. Number 2, customer segment. Number 3, channels. Number 4, customer relationships. Number 5, revenue streams. Number 6, key resources. Number 7, partners. Number 8, activities. Number 9, cost structure. So, if you want to see your business completely, right, you want to build this model canvas. When you build it, you will see your entire business. Okay. So let me briefly explain you what these items are. Number 1, value proposition. What is that? What problem or social need you are solving? That is very fundamental, very straight question. What are you doing? What is the problem you are solving? Right? You need to be able to very clearly define it. If you cannot define it, there's a fundamental problem, right? Number 2, customer. Who wants to pay for your products and services, and why? Number 2, why would somebody want to pay you to get your service? Okay, what is the value for the customer, and how much he would like to pay you, right? Sometimes you have good inventions, products, and people say, okay, very good, they clap you. But if you ask them if you want to pay for it, they would say, no, I don't want to pay, right? But they cheer you for doing a good job. But here, what matters is not that cheering, but whether you have some people who are willing to pay for your service, right? Or product. Number three, channels. How to deliver products, services to customers from 1 to 2 through 3. Channel. Physical items, you transport using vehicles. There can be online stuff, you sell online, right? There's so many different ways of channeling your product from your company to the customers. You have to figure it out. How do you bring the service to the customer? Number 4, customer relationship. How do you get, retain, and grow your customers? Number 4. You need to think very clearly how you should attract your first customer and then the next customer and so on. Not only that, how do you maintain them? How do you make them pay more, right? And keep stay with you, right? Become like a permanent member, right, of the company, a permanent customer of the company, and keep buying certain stuff, right? And also, how do you grow your customers? You need to think about that, right? If you get the customers and if you do not plan for that, they will leave you, and you get new customers, they will also leave you, but you can't maintain your customer base. You need to consciously think about it. If a customer comes to you, how can you bring him back for the second purchase, for the third purchase, and so on, right? So that is extremely important. Customer relationships. Number 5, revenue model. That's very important. This is how you make money. There are so many ways to make money, right? What are they? Sometimes retail. You give the product and get your money. That's it. But that's not the only way. You can have subscription, for example. Right? Then it's annual subscription. Every year, your customer pays you some money. Membership, or maybe easy payment. You don't ask him to pay the whole amount, but you break it down, make life easier for your customer. So you get the money, but not as a lump sum, but in installments. And sometimes you may have seen some software, they say, okay, free, anybody can use it. So everybody uses it because you don't have to pay, right? And you get a lot of people to use it, but you don't get a penny. But what happens is that you have your premium version, which is not free, and not a lot of people purchase it, but 10%, maybe 5% of your people who use your free version, right, would like to pay a little amount and get the premium version, the paid version. So that 10% is your customers, actual customers. But to get into that 10%, you need to make it free to everybody, and there should be a free version. So this is how the software industry works, right? So see how smart these people are, entrepreneurs are, to find out smart ways to attract customers and then build a customer base, right? Then number 6, key resources. Now you can't deliver your service without resources. You need to figure out what you need. Raw material, human resources, skills, vehicles, buildings, machines. You need to figure that out, point 4. If you don't have any of these things, you're in trouble, right? So before you get going, it's like before you set off for a journey, right? You make sure you have everything with you, right? You don't go halfway and figure out whether you have everything. No, you have to plan everything before you set off. So the key resources, you need to know what these resources are. Number 7, partners. Again, you are not playing a one-man show here. So sometimes I have seen failure cases where there's one person or maybe two, and they are the CEO, technical officer, marketing officer, finance officer, and delivery guy, they do all kinds of things. It's a failure model. You need to have partnerships, right? You don't build the whole thing yourself. You get certain parts designed and built by certain partners, and sometimes you assemble and testing is done by someone else. That's okay to have it, right? But finally, you need to have a good product, value proposition. You need to solve a problem. How you solve it doesn't matter. And some people, some entrepreneurs, some tech guys think that they need to build everything themselves to prove, to tell to the world, I built it, we built it entirely. There's no meaning of that. What what is really meaningful is that you have your value proposition. You have something that solves someone's problem, and therefore someone wants to pay you back. Okay, so if you have that one, so it's okay. That's all what you need. So partners, you have to figure out who are those partners. Okay, and then number 8, key activities. That is, what are the activities? Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. You have to deliver. Right. So if you are running a restaurant, you have to cook, right? That is the main activity. But there are other activities also. You need to figure out what are these activities. If you cannot cook, you can't run a restaurant unless you have a partner, right? Who is a cook or chef, right? So like that, you have to figure out what are your key activities. It does not limit to manufacturing or design or whatever, but also if you think of customer base, how to maintain your customers, and that can be a key activity as well. Whatever main activities that you need to do to deliver your service, right? You have to figure out over here. So if you haven't done it for your startup, I think you need to do it, right? Number 9, cost structure. Ah, how much it's gonna cost you to do all these things. You have to bring your resources, you have to deliver activities and maintain your partners, you have to pay some money to partners for their services. You have to actually put everything in here, cost structure. What are the major costs? Right? Sometimes I have seen your cost analysis is not good because you only see the main cost, not the overheads and the other costs, right? So you need to make sure that everything, every important cost items are taken care of and they are here. Then you know how much money is required, right, to start the business. So my experience up to date working with different startups is that um, planning is not that great in our ecosystem, and sometimes you get going, right, without the complete picture. I know it is hard to have complete picture upfront, but if you follow these steps like business model canvas, you can get most of the parts assembled before you get going. So the danger of setting off without a proper plan is that you will encounter problems on the way. So anyway, for startups, right, there are problems on the way. And if you don't have a plan and you set off, you have more problems. Okay. So more problems means, yeah, it's going to be very difficult. Uh, so that is why they're preaching you to take all these things, right, and sit back and relax and write it down, okay, and figure out where you are in your business, right? So that will guide yourself to do whatever you want to do next, right, before you set off as a company. So networking with partners and stakeholders, it's extremely important. As I said to you, you are not running a one-man show, okay? So you need to figure out who are those partners, how to build partnerships with them. So what value they bring in? It's not the individual people or whatever. It's the value they bringing to the company. What value is being brought by your partners, partner 1, partner 2, etc. And at what cost? How much you have to pay them? back and when. You have to stagger it, right? So without knowing how much you have to pay and when, if you just enter into partnership, at some point of time, you will ask, okay, can I have my payments, charges, right? And you are in trouble because you have not planned for that. So it is unnecessary problems in the way, right? You need to know how much you have to pay for your partners and when. And it's very important to have mutual understanding. That is extremely important. Even though we try to get the contractual agreements, MOUs, documents signed, this is a human to human thing at the end of the day. So if you need to work with good people, ethical people, right? So therefore, the mutual understanding and good conduct is extremely important. It cannot be replaced by contractual agreements, but you need to have contractual agreements uh, where you have all these anomalies, situations foreseen and addressed. Okay, just to be safe. And the contractual agreements, when you write it down, it should be a win-win to both parties, to you as well as your partner. Otherwise, why would anybody want to partner with you if it is not a good deal for him or her, right? So you have to look at, you have to put yourself in their shoes and uh, look at this partnership. It's a win-win for both. Right? Sometimes people don't believe win-win case. They think, okay, if you win, somebody has to lose. It's not the case. There are cases both parties can win where there is no loser, right? Right. Number 10, investors and equity sharing. Every startup needs investment because you are not bringing a lot of money out of your pocket. You are bringing in a product, okay, not money. But to expand initially, you need someone else, an investor, to bring in money. And no one gives you money for nothing, right? Everybody expect something in return, and that something is basically the ownership of the company. So you need to figure out what is the value of your company versus how much you are bringing from outside, right? If it is one to one, maybe you value your company and it is, let's say, 1 million, and someone is bringing you money another 1 million, so like 50-50. So therefore you're supposed to give 50% of your ownership of the company to the investor, right? Something like that. uh, Not only that, ownership sharing, sometimes you need to change the composition of the board. So the investor says, okay, I want to have two board memberships, right? And he will appoint two additional board members to the board of directors. And also sometimes he says, I want to change the brand also. As you know, for every company, branding is extremely important, right? Let's say if you are a biomedical company, right, producing some biomedical stuff, then you build a brand around it, and everybody knows you because of the product you manufacture. And then all of a sudden, if you manufacture something else, right, your brand is going to dilute, right? So you have to keep an eye on your branding and always develop your brand, right? So that if you develop your brand pretty well to a certain level, you are eliminating your competitors. So you make life very difficult for the competitors to compete with you because you have built your brand so high. Then finance handling. It's very important that you keep records of every expenditure, right? In a notebook or wherever, piece of paper, right? Record it. And your money and company money are two different monies. Do not mix them up. And I've seen people doing that and they don't know how much they spend for the company, right? And then they cannot actually uh, uh, measure or set the price points, etc. at some point in time. Therefore, right from the day one, you need to have the financial hygiene, right? Um, and every expenditure, right, related to the company should be recorded. Now, there are costs uh, that incur before you incorporate the company, right? Because the startup is a process. It takes some time. You can't actually figure out the start point. Okay, it's a evolutionary thing. And at some point of time, you open your bank account, and then you have some money in the bank account. But before that, you may have spent some money. So you can write it down somewhere. If you have a record, right, you can keep this as some money that you use but not seen in your bank account. And there are ways to handle or recover that money. Then number 12, human resource management. Uh, you have to recruit and retain skills. I do not just recruit people without knowing what they are going to deliver to your company, right? And how much you have to pay for them, monthly basis, annually. You need to have some figure because you're burning your resources for every employee, right? You have to pay some money. So if you don't have a plan and if you recruit people, you are only losing your funds. So therefore, if it is a project based thing, if you have a project, you have the budget, there you have money allocated for people for various services, then you can recruit people and you know how much is allocated and what they are going to deliver to you. And after the project, it's over. There's no permanent commitment. So you recruit people on contract basis, project basis, right? Maybe initially. But when you have some resources in your company, build capital, then you can recruit people, right? Not project based, but on permanent base. Then you can keep paying them every month because you know you get enough and more contracts and jobs to do. Okay, so it's extremely important uh, uh, to handle human resources properly. And also, sometimes you have a situation where the uh, you in one way is a board member, you are a director of the company, and on the other hand, you are an employee of the company. Right? Think about your own companies. You play these dual roles. Okay. On one hand, you are a board member. On the other hand, you are an engineer of the company. Right. So this is a potential conflict of interest. Why? When you are sitting in the board as a director, you discuss about various decisions, policy changes of the company that affect the employees. And if you are also an employee, right, uh, you are making your own rules. So conflict of interest is something like that. You can't make your own rules, right? The director board makes the rules and employees follow the rules, right? In a way. So I have had experience with some employees and employer conflict with the same person having dual roles. And in that case, we ask him to, in the board meetings, we ask him to leave the room when we discuss about matters related to employees, right? But it's not a very pleasant situation, right? If your team is your batchmates, very friendly people, sometimes it's difficult to say, right? Can you step out because we want to discuss some matters related to employees, and you are being an employee, you should not engage in this discussion, right? So, as much as possible, try to avoid this kind of conflict of interest. And also, you have to know about labor laws, EPF, ETF, gratuity. You have to pay for your employees and make sure you have enough revenue to pay for your employees. Okay. Then the legal framework, you have to work with the Inland Revenue Department, tax returns, right? Every March, end of March, you have to do the tax return, and make sure you outsource this job to company secretarial service so that they do that. You just hand over your checkbook and other documents. They will do the documentation and submit to the Inland Revenue Department so that you can keep your focus on your technology development, marketing, and customer dealing with the customers, etc. Right? And be careful about the labor laws and labor disputes can kill you, right? So don't run into these problems. Try to avoid these problems by doing it in the proper way, right? And also environmental laws. If there are any applicable environmental laws, right, you have to adhere to those laws, right? Import, export laws. There are so many different laws, right? You have to be mindful about these laws. Finally, this is the final slide, continuous product development. Uh, uh, as I said at the beginning, you build your startup based on one product almost always. And at that point, you think the whole future is around this product. But then you soon realize that every product has a certain life cycle, and there's a start and there's an end. So when the product comes to an end, you're not going to close down your startup, right? Then what's the solution? You need to have some plan for continuous product development. So let me tell you this briefly. When you introduce your product to the market, you do a lot of advertising, marketing, and let people know about how good your product is, the benefits, and it is cost effective and so on, right? So it will take some time for people to make their minds to purchase your product. And at some point, you catch up the momentum and people want to buy from you. And that is the growth stage. You enter to the growth stage, right? So customers are purchasing, buying your product. And then at some point, it comes to a maturity level, and there you have the maximum uh, selling, right, of the product. So large volumes, therefore, cost of production is low, most profitable stage, right? And it leads to saturation because the market is finite. You can't keep growing exponentially, right? It will saturate. And people also sometimes want to have a different model, different product. Always there are competitors and they're bringing high-tech products, better products, low-cost products, different designs, right? So in a competition, sometimes you lose, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So it is inevitable that some point customers want to change their mind to a different product, or a competitor will bring in a better product. So whatever it is, you will enter to a declining phase, right? So at some point of time, you want to discontinue your product. You have seen a lot of products discontinued, right? So after the life cycle, this happens. So what you're going to do about it? The company must live longer than that period. So you have to do the product augmentation. If you do the product augmentation, you can change this curve to a different level and get going again, right? But sooner or later, it will come to an end. So then you have to bring alternative products. So when your first product goes to the maturity level, you better start something new. Okay. Do not try to patch your same product that you started off your startup with indefinitely. It's not going to happen, right? When the product reaches to the maturity level, you better start in-house development of something else that you want to piggyback on this product, right? When this product comes to the declining phase. So be mindful about that. Right. So that's about it for today. If you have any questions, we can discuss those questions quickly. I'm also late.